Hi, so today we're going to be working with clay. If you don't already have a flat piece of clay to roll out, you have to sometimes wedge it. If you look in here, you can see these holes. We don't want those air bubbles to get caught in there. So when we wedge clay, we push it with the heel of our hand, because what you're trying to do is get all of those air bubbles out. And this takes a little bit of time and practice to do. But you want to work at it until essentially you get a nice selection of clay. Then I use the heel of my hand, that's this part right here, to push it out a little bit. And we're going to be rolling out our tiki mugs today. So then I get my rolling pin. I don't use these handles because it tends not to roll as well. You get a much better grip if you just roll up here. And of course, when you're rolling it out, you don't want any of these edges to be smaller than the middle, so you have to push harder when you're rolling out in the middle because you want to push the clay to elongate it. But when you get to the edge, you don't want it to be squished. So I actually have to push lighter by the time I get to the edge so I don't squish out that end. Okay. And you notice I keep turning it while I'm rolling it so that I can get more space on my clay. Trying to get it as smooth as possible. See, like I can see the ridges here. I want to push just enough to get rid of those ridges, and what that does is it moves the clay that direction. Let me get this back under the film camera for you. There we go. So then the next thing I need to do is cut out the part of my mug that's going to be the rectangle that we're going to bring around to make a cylinder. So if I don't have templates for you guys to trace on size, you're going to have to kind of eyeball it. I go straight across, so two parallel lines. It's about the height of my whole hand. I'm going to move the pieces out of the way that I don't need. I'm going to save those for later because we're going to come back to those. Don't just crumple them up. Leave them nice and flat. And then I want to try to get these edges as straight as possible. And we're going to check it to see what kind of shape it's going to make for our tiki mug. So it's about that high and about as big around as my fist, which is what we're kind of looking for this. So now the next thing I have to do to put this together is to score and slip the edge and create the bottom. So to create the bottom, I'm going to take another little smaller piece of clay. It doesn't quite fit in my fist, but it's pretty close. And again, we're going to wedge it just a little bit to make sure there's not a whole bunch of air pockets in there. This one's a mini wedge because he's a little piece of clay. Kind of start wedging it more ball shape since we're going for a circle. Okay. And push it down with the heel of my hand. We want it about the same thickness as we have our mug, so when you're rolling it out, you want to be careful. If you want to put a pencil next to it to keep it about pencil thickness, that's a good idea. You could even do a pencil on each side and then roll it. Okay. And we're going to leave it larger than what we need so that we can trim off the extra after we build the mug up on top. The purpose of scoring and slipping is to make sure that your pieces of clay bind together while they're still wet, so that when they dry and shrink a little, they don't pull apart. Essentially, when you're scoring the two sides and scratching them up and then you're pushing them together, it's helping them combine like a zipper so they don't like to pull apart. Because clay shrinks as it dries, and if you get too many air pockets in there and you don't slip it with the liquid in between, they'll just pull apart in the kiln and none of your pieces will stick together. So the first thing we're going to look at doing is putting together the top of our mug. I'm going to move our bottom, and where we're going to combine this edge and put it together, score and slip it, I'm going to score it first. That means I'm going to scratch it up a little bit, not super deep, but you want to be able to see these and you want them to grip together. They can be at an angle, they can be straight across, it really doesn't matter. As long as you rough up the edge of that clay a little bit. Then you're going to do the same thing on this edge of clay over here. We're going to rough it up. just like that. And then you're going to get your fingers a little wet, and you're going to get that side just a little wet, and this is why it's called scoring and slipping. You've scored it, and now you're making it slippery, like slip. Okay, and then I want to bring those two edges gently together, but firmly, because I want them to actually stick. I'm going to stand it up and down. It makes it a little harder for you to see this part. And I'm going to put one hand inside to hold it, and with the other hand, I'm going to rub it across to smooth it out and seal that line. This will be the hardest part of your project right here, is getting this line sealed up and smoothed out, because your clay is still pretty wet and heavy right now, so it wants to do its own thing. It doesn't want to listen to you. But you can keep your hands and your fingers, see both my fingers and hands are underneath while I'm working on this. That's to do counter pressure on the back so that it doesn't fall apart and just poke in the back. Get my fingers a little bit more wet to smooth it out. Remember, while we're making tiki mugs or cups, they're not necessarily going to be something we really drink out of. We have to make sure, if we are going to do that, that you're using glaze that's specifically geared towards eating and drinking. Otherwise, some glazes that colorize your mugs, they still have lead in them as part of the color, and lead is not a good thing for you to use food or drink out of. So make sure you ask your teacher first, what kind of glaze will we be using for these mugs, before you drink or eat out of anything you ever make with clay. Smooth the edges here, and I'm also going back down inside a little bit and smoothing out that inside seam as much as I can. I'm just being very gentle and pinching kind of like this while my fingers are still wet. We want them to stay slippery. If they get sticky, add a little bit more water. Don't get too much. I've seen it go the other direction too, where students put too much water on and then your clay cracks because it has too much water, dries out too fast in the kiln, and then it will break. All right, so now I have essentially the mug portion that we're going to be decorating later. I want to connect it to the bottom, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to score this edge around here. Again, scoring just means roughing it up, and then we're going to get it a little wet around the edge, just like that. And then I'm going to drop this on, push it gently, tap, 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 and then pull it off, because that's going to show me the wet ring on there of where I need to score this side, because I can't just stick it on. Both sides have to be scored so that they can zipper together. I'll line it up as best I can back on there, flip it over, okay, and now we have all this extra that I need to cut off, right? Let me move this over where you can see it a little better. There we go. And I'm just going to take my toothpick and push it down in there all the way until I can feel the fabric. I can feel it kind of zipping along the bottom. And I might have to pick it up and put it in over here and pull it this way, because it's always easier to pull a toothpick towards you than it is to push it away. And then I'm going to kind of take off the extra. Keep following the bottom edge of my cup all the way around, like that. Now I can take my cup and flip it over, and I can, with that wet finger, smooth the bottom into the rest of my cup. You want to try and stay away from messing with this as much as possible. It's already nice and flat the way you want it. You don't want to get this edge too curved, because otherwise you'll have a tippy cup. It'll just keep tipping over on you instead of a tiki cup. So be very careful about where you're going. And again, if you want this to be something you're actually going to use, make sure all of those lines are sealed up, or else you'll have a leaky cup, and that won't do you any good either. So this is now the base of our cup that we're going to use. We can't start adding to it today. We have to let it firm up just a little bit. So we're going to be putting these in your plastic gallon Ziploc bags that should have your names on them already. We're going to let them sit on the shelf, and they'll firm up a little bit so that when we come back next week, we can start adding the designs to them.